In ancient times, salmon was the main source of sustenance. Not only did they consume it as food, they also traded it to neighboring lands. Such was the value of salmon in the region. The waters around the 4 islands of the Northern Territories are rich fishing grounds. It has long been regarded as one of the world's 3 largest fishing areas. This abundance of marine resources led to the rise of various industries. Many businessmen moved to Nemuro to engage in seafood processing. It was the richness of the sea that gave birth to these industries and attracted many people to work in the region. Japanese fishing vessels also started to expand their fishing range to include the waters off the Chiishima Islands and the Kamchatka Peninsula. In contrast, development of the region's inland areas was slower to progress. In particular, the Tondenhei military settlers had to face much hardship. By 1886, the Wada Tondenhei, who settled in Nemuro, had built a farming village of about 440 families. However, many of them were unused to farming, and with the soil being unsuitable for growing crops, coupled with the frequent occurrence of sea fog and strong winds, cultivation work did not go well. A turning point came in 1933, when the Hokkaido government rolled out the 5-year Farming Development Plan for the Konsen Plain, which prompted a major shift to dairy farming in the region. After various region-wide efforts, the dairy industry began to show some level of growth. The industries in the region experienced significant changes after the Second World War. In particular, the fishing industry became faced with a more difficult environment. The occupation of the Northern Territories by the Soviet Union meant that Japanese vessels could not readily fish in the resource-rich waters around the 4 islands. Salmon fishing around the Chiishima Islands also resumed, but in 1956, the Soviet Union established a fishery regulation zone and set limits to Japan's annual catch. Many fishing vessels were seized and made to pay heavy fines after being caught in the restricted areas. In 1955, the region's dairy industry took a big step forward through a project known as the Konsen Pilot Farm. Financed through loans from the World Bank, the project involved large-scale reclamation of land for dairy farms using modern machinery. In 1973, as a replacement for the pilot farm project, the government launched the New Dairy Village Construction Project. This approach became the norm in the Konsen Plateau until the 1990s, and it helped establish the region as a kingdom of dairy. From the 1990s, the number of dairy farms started to decline in some areas due to farmer aging and lack of successors. Fearing a crisis, many agricultural cooperatives in the region began efforts to attract new farmers.
牛作りの前に装置作り、土作りから始まるので、そこの面ではすごい勉強になることがたくさんありますね。こうしたらいいよ、ああしたらいいよっていう話はちょくちょくうちにまでわざわざ来て話をしてくれるっていうのがだいぶ助かってる。
As for the fishing industry, in the face of increasing restrictions and seizures of fishing vessels, there was a man who decided to make a stand. His name was Motoji Kawabata, and he was the president of the Nemuro Fisheries Cooperative Association. He was instrumental in the resumption of salmon and trout fishing after the war, and he became a prominent industry leader not just in Nemuro, but in all of Hokkaido. At the time, most of the vessel seizures were occurring around Kaigara Island, just 3.7 kilometers away from Cape Nosaku. In response, Kawabata conducted direct negotiations with the Soviet side for a total of 22 times, despite not being able to speak any Russian. The efforts of Kawabata and other key persons eventually paid off, and the local fishing industry achieved its peak catches during the 1990s. However, the global fishing industry is now facing an increasingly uncertain future due to rapidly depleting fish stocks, believed to be a result of climate change and overfishing. But the fishing industry of Nemuro has learned a lot from the tough times of the past, and they are not averse to taking on new challenges. They have already begun efforts to become an industry that manages marine resources sustainably.
昔のように資源増えれば一番いいんでしょうけど、少ないながらも持続していく必要があるのかなとは思ってますけど、
羅臼町自体が盛り上がれるようなその原動力として、漁業があるようになっていくことが望ましいと思います。
The dairy industry has its own innovations. The Nemuro region accounts for around 20% of all the dairy cattle and milk production volume in Hokkaido, making it one of the most prominent dairy farming regions in the island.
あとはもう確実に仕事が搾乳の部分がすごい楽になったので。
They are continuously working to find how best to utilize, protect, and develop the region's resources. They are able to shine in their efforts because they learned to never give up and keep moving forward despite facing adversity.